straitjacket. It's still imagination, still intuitive, but it's now in a straitjacket of factual thinking. So it seems like your emergent stage is this, it's an emotional thing of order within complexity, where you're returning to the emotions of elegance, structure, understanding, and then it's functioning intuitively again at that higher level.
How do you deal with intuition?
Lauren
Okay, let
is
me
already
rephrase his question.
jumping. He's already using, and of course, any modifications are welcome. So, so when you talk about intuition, I think in my model, intuition is a very high level thing. It's actually a lot of statistics going on there. Uh, Sometimes we call that intuition discrimination. Let's say you're going through a parking lot in the dark evening, and you see a group of black kids gathering there, and intuitionally you want to go outside. You want to leave it further instead of directly go into the group. And people say, that's discrimination. Discrimination comes from intuition, and that intuition comes from experience. A news report, a lot of police report. So there's a statistics there. It's a probability that I will get more danger going there. So I'd rather not. So that process is already at the goal setting level, not at the basic level, right?
Okay,
Am
well,
I
let me ask. No,
looking the same thing with what do you want to talk?
I understand your answer, Jason. Now I'd like to ask Lauren. I never before heard that I can recall of the word of elegance associated with intuition. What do you mean by elegance of intuition?
Not arrogant, not arrogant. The discrimination.
Okay, what Jason is describing is happening at a cultural level. That's cultural intuition. Yes, okay. I'm talking more about the light bulb that goes on top of the head when suddenly everything fits together. That's the order within complexity. It's an understanding thing. It's beyond the discrimination to, aha, I see the light. And that seems to be the emergent thing that's popping up in the middle.
That I think happens at our neural network level. And the RAM may have more explanation on that. That aha moment is exactly very interesting. The Herman Hawking would say the synergetic process. So you have some random processes or ad hoc process going on this part, some part going on that part, and suddenly they kind of light up and hands with each other. And that is the formation of a new concept. And that was actually dealt with by McCullough and Pitts. They want to explain what is singular concept that jumps into our mind. And they try to do a little circuit to explain. And today, things become much more complicated as those LLM, large language models, that the models can create a lot of intuition, like you said, and to amaze you. That's the high level. Yeah, but it is suddenly. I was trying to say all the self-organization processes take time. And yeah, maybe sometime the time jump into shrink, collapse into one second. Well,
Okay.
some ideas you can get from long years, like many years, but some ideas you can jump in. For example, if what I'm saying here makes some sense to you guys, then that may connect shortcut, long process in a second as well.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll move on to what the questions that I have with regard to it.
Your voice is a little slow. Let me maybe
the voice is not good.
No.
I could hear you.
Okay. Now it's better.
Okay, so Jason, the Club of Remy has been active now for 3 or 4 years, I guess, and
Yeah.
I've often
4
been
years.
fascinated. 4 years. I've been fascinated by some of your ideas and perceptions, not because they are unreasonable to me, but because they reflect a different sort of thinking. And so I finally concluded that you're really reflecting both the Eastern philosophies of knowledge or wisdom or whatever with the Western philosophies of knowledge and wisdom and behaviors. And so I've finally been able to pin down now, I think, parts of this discussion that were not that have puzzled me for on many, many topics as I've listened to your various philosophies. And today you did an excellent job of summarizing these many views. And that clarified parts of my thinking about the distinction between Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. And so the following things then that I find different between the perceptions that you project to us today and what I would think are not only my own views, but partially my own views, but mainly the philosophical Western approach. And so I have 4 categories here. And I mean categories here more or less as icons of imagination or imagination of illuminations. And the first of these would be the very notion of abstraction itself. So Western philosophies, particularly Western mathematics, is heavily dominated by predicate logic. And this comes from Frege and Frege's notion of the relation between the concept and the sentence, or the concept and the predicate. So that level of abstraction, if you'd like a book on this, the book is by Kit Fine, The Limits of Abstraction.
Can you send us the link?
Pardon?
Can you send us the link? Or if the link, name, put the name in the chat box.
Yeah, KIT Fine, FINE. Limits of Abstraction is the title of the book, 2002.
2002.
Okay, and so the notion here is heavily based on the notion of the relationship between sentences and logic. Okay, and so here I think the question of how the Oriental symbols are used to make sentences comes into play, but I'm not certain how that really works in your mind. What the difference between a Western sentence is and a Chinese character or Japanese character or Korean character or that. So that's point 1. The second point is what is actually associated with the first, and that is the question of identity. And how does the notion of identity enter into this view of systems thinking? And precisely where does it enter into the view of systems thinking? And the biomedical example you gave towards the end is a very crisp example of the human heterogeneity of being. The notion of existence comes forth in the doctor's office, where the doctor must very directly confront that he is dealing with you, not with someone else, but you as a person, as an individual, as a dynamical system, as a collection of molecules, as a cultural heritage, everything else that goes into being an individual in time and space in the course of history. Okay, so that role of identity here is not just a matter of symbolizing 1 through 10 on the fingers. It's far deeper than that. So the identity of a system is immediate concern here in Western philosophy. I don't see how it works in Eastern philosophy. Following that directly is the question of speciation. I did not see at all in your slides or that the concept of speciation, that is that which separates one sort of problem from another sort of problem. How do you really separate the distinction between a problem, say, at the current time, the crisis apparently in China with regard to leadership versus the crisis in America with regard to leadership? How do you separate those two species of problems? How do you separate two species of, in biology, it's pretty simple. You can distinguish rats from mice. You can distinguish E. coli from Salmonella typhimurium. You can determine speciation. And that speciation is what gives the dynamics to the system. So without speciation, approaching the issues of dynamics is almost mute. You have to first somehow come to grips with the concrete notion of speciation in all of your items of discussion of these three systems of representation you gave. So SCI is three systems of representation, as I understand it. Now, I may not be right there in terms of the nature of speciation, but that part is something to think about, how you appropriate this in an abstract conceptual notion in terms of your systems thinking. Okay, so the last one that I have for you, I don't mean to drag this out, but the question of logic itself. Exactly. Aristotle's four causes. Okay. The last one is for question of formality. You a priori assume, in a sort of a Kantian sense, of the notions of symbolizations that are going to be generic, symbolizations that are going to apply to everything. And this correspondingly, the way you structure your sentences as you give your descriptions, all sort of have an implication towards the notion that there's a formal background behind it, such as the formal background that Shannon brought forth, or the formal background of discreteness that of mathematics that Wiener brought forth. And of course, from my own perspective, I'm a biochemist, and so my symbol system is set up around the reference of chemical symbols. And obviously, given the nature of this presentation, you avoided any notion, or not avoided, but had no need to express anything in terms of chemical symbolization or genetic symbolizations. And so this area of what symbol system are you going to use to inform your logic? What symbol system are you going to bring forth that are going to tie these 10 points together? How is that going to work in your notions? And if you just assume as background continuous functions, which is the standard default mode of Western.
Okay.
So there I finished what I wanted to say, those 4 points, and I'm anxious to hear your responses.
Last question first. You see, I have been promoting us to create a tool. A tool means that it can do anything. You can use a telescope to look at the White House, and you can use your telescope to look at Beijing. And it's the same telescope. And you can, when you point your telescope to the different direction, and you can say, now I see something like this, blah, blah, blah. You can list the structure. You can describe the structure. You can describe the procedure, figure out the procedure. You can figure out all the cultures like that. So as a tool, it should be generic. No discrimination, no you don't have to specify what the word you use,
Specification.
specification. You have to do it case by case, because this is the methodology. Once you use this methodology, you use it in your chemical area, and there's a chemical case. So you can pull out a protein molecular and say, okay, the structure is like this, and you can draw the diagram of the structure, and then you can pay the attention to it. Like, what are their reactions? So during a human digestion of, when we're eating other life form of other proteins, we what is the process that stuff in your stomach break the chicken's protein into something useful for your body, and then reassemble that. And so that's the procedural dimension. And the cultural dimension would be just like your current chemical environment situation, your enzymes situation, your digestive power, and your all kinds of the lab report data, your blood sugar, etc. That group of thing. So my proposal is, if you can use all these three together, suddenly you have a better image of what you are trying to understand, the problems image. So back to your previous question, the different problems. I would say that why we human beings think about the need to use a tool is because at first we have a problem, or the human being perceived a problem that needs some handling. So it is problem first, and the methodology second, and then you use your methodology. And back question to the culture thing, yeah, I 100% agree with you that I have to do the combination, because I was born and grew up inside China, a totally different society with you guys. And I escaped that. I was one of the dissidents that do not want to compromise, do not want to obey. So 3 times escaped, and 3 times I was trying to change China. So change China from various ways, including introducing to Chinese people what the facilitation means. Facilitation, and before they can even reach to the point of what we call democracy. So yes, I have been educated or fooled within the Chinese culture, and then become extremely critical, criticizing a lot of traditions there, and come here to embrace the Western thought, and then discover still have a lot of problems in Western thought. So that's the only way. That's the only way that maybe we can combine something. But I would like to be very careful there, because it's a lot of long distance nonsense. I mean, what is long distance nonsense is a lot of China experts on this country are talking nonsense from a perspective of the insider, that we can or to be polite, it's just a tourist view. A tourist view is not a really local view of that society, you know. And who is to trust more? I think you guys need to trust me more coming from the inside. So inside view. Ego has inside view about the former Yugoslavia, right? And who so, uh, uh,
I agree. That this is the essence or parts of this, and very definitely the tourist view that you get from going through versus the living in the country for a few years, which I had in Germany and whatnot. They're two totally different views. But that still doesn't. Well, let Igor go with it. Oh, go. I don't want to dominate the conversation. Basically, I
So
want to hear
that's,
other people's responses.
but is it is so we have talking about two views. I think one of them is a view of whole, and the other is the view of parts. When we talk about people in the country, they have details about the country. The tourist have a view of a whole of the country. So maybe you can also extend that to the Eastern and Western, being sort of a seeing a systems point of view, the other more like being in the detail point of view. Makes sense
yeah,
to me.
some of the Eastern thought are preliminary. When you on the first side, you see, oh, it's a system thinking. For example, they perceive the human body is the whole related system. One part will do another, and so when you have a dentist tooth problem, you go to see a Chinese doctor, and he will ask you to eat some penis of bulls. Why? Now the logic comes. Jerry, you interesting logic. Logic says teeth is the end of your bone. Okay, the bone has the master of your kidney, and the kidney and your testicle is the same thing. Okay, so your teeth has the problem. You have to enhance your testicle. Therefore, you need to eat some cooked penis of bulls. So that is the logic. It's not a joke. It's seriously in record. And that kind of a logic is completely unacceptable. Even from my father's generation, they know it's totally wrong. But it's just very stubborn staying there. Still today, on the internet, you can still have a lot of bullshit about the Chinese medicine. It's not a Chinese medicine. It's just a primitive society's primitive medicine. And they call Western medicine Western medicine. It's not Western medicine. It's advanced modern medicine. So that fight is always there. But the ancient Eastern people had their way to form their wisdom, so to call, if you call wisdom, because there's nothing called logic, Jerry. No logic. everything is analogy or metaphor. So it's a metaphorical thinking, even to the language itself. The Chinese character are actually little drawings of the initial picture. For example, if you draw a woman and you drawing a child put together, and that is the character says good.
Oh, you said something very curious to me. That is, you say there's no word or there's no symbol for logic.
There are characters. Characters itself is a little drawing. It's It's like ancient Egypt. So that drawing directly shoot an image in your mind. So that's created another a different type of a symbolic system.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
difficulty to describe it. But Paul Pongaro, once we talked about this, and we co-authored an article, and we did several drawings,
but more directly,
several characters, and he got it published. And Hans first saw that and sent us the Chinese concept of everybody is a big family. Big family is the translation of everybody. So Hans used to write a funny letter using that concept. He said that shows how soft our reality is. I need to dig out that thing, but anyway, it's a different thinking system until I have to learn English. So
I think
learning
let me
English
comment
is the
here.
starting point, and the
Let me comment on
logic.
that, because that addresses directly my last point on the question of formality. Because if you do not have within the Chinese character system the notion of concept as a character, then Frege's notion of how sentences are formed is completely foreign to your mindset. That Frege's notion of concept as a source of language and this discrepancies and when I say Frege here, I'm implying all of the logic of Western mathematics come from this notion that you can separate the concept from its implication. And he used, what was his example? Morning star and evening star as being two things that were distinct. So formalization then in terms of the language, and that's a totally new concept to me, that you could have a language without the notion of a concept.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
can you hear me? Can
yes.
you hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's the point I think I've tried to convey before. If you look at sentence construction, we have subject, verb, object is one form. Subject, object, verb is the another form. More than 60% of the languages in the world are based on actually subject, object, verb. Okay, so what's the big difference between the two? Subject, when you say subject, object, and then the verb, it is focused on relationship between subject and object. And the culture that focuses on the relationship uses that type of sentence construction, and those are the languages. Whereas if you say subject, verb, and then the object, the focus is on the action. It's more egocentric, subject and the verb, noun and the verb, and those are different types of language, that culture, all those things. So this is, I think, is the fundamental difference between East and West. So you cannot say that there is no concept in it. The relationship is the what binds the sentence, the class construction. Whereas the other way is subject verb is based on action, and now you're focused on matter. So there's a fundamental, this is again like what Asman was explaining earlier. Do you want to look at the whole or the parts?
Okay, Ram,
okay, so when you start talking about symbols.
Okay, Ram, this goes back directly to my third language that I introduced in my talk at the beginning of the earlier description. In the third language that I described between mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, in chemistry, this is not the notion of concept. The chemical symbol system is not based on subject-object sorts of relationships. The chemical reaction is from subject to subject. from subject to subject is a chemical reaction description within that symbol system. This is not the Phrygian view or the notion that you were describing in terms of the structure of most of the languages. It's a separate, distinct symbol system that is used to formalize both chemistry and biology.
Okay.
I wonder how Jason would characterize a verb in Chinese. Is there a special character for it?
Character what? Right.
Is there a special character for verbs?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see from the character that it is a verb, or is it just
No.
attributed over all the meaning?
See, what we talk about the Chinese today has been heavily influenced backwards, back way from Japanese. And Chinese, Japanese, and the Japanese share the same set of Asian characters. But once the Western culture entered into the Eastern hemisphere, Japanese created a lot of new words, including what you said, verb. But in ancient Chinese language, there was no verb to be. So there is no is, no am, no are. They build up the relationship of two objects just to use some kind of a preposition, like I just said, the teeth issue. If you have a dentist issue, then they link subjectively. They link the teeth into the bones, and they link the bones into your genitals, and then so they treat your genital when you have a dentist problem, and that is a typical example of how that kind of logic runs. But after 1840, when the British opened the door of China, and the Chinese realized, oh, there is a bigger outside world that do things differently than us. And the conversation or communication start trying to learn from each other.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know much about Chinese, but I think discussing this, we're trying to come up with a theory of everything to understand, different cultures. Now, in English, the modularity parts are letters, right? You put letters together, you make up a word or a concept. Are you saying in Chinese to make up a concept, you put your modularity, you put other concepts together, like you put a cow and a something together, you make a new concept, or was it, or you have?
Yeah, you put different characters together. So in the beginning,
characters or different concepts, but
character itself is a fuzzy concept. Some of them more clear than others. Some of them may carry a lot of connotation that you have to distinguish from the context.
So when you look at a concept, a Chinese written in Chinese, what do you see in it? Do you see it's made up of other concepts?
It's made
that's
of
very interesting idea, huh?
No, we have first we have a single characters. So young kids need to start learning the characters one by one. It's not just 26. It's about 3,000. You have to memorize each one and how to stroke out each. So that's your first layer of concept. And then you put them together like two characters form a word, 2 or 3 or even 4. So you build up, and so your vocabulary becomes richer and richer as the combination of these characters. The official Chinese government dictated learning for literacy is about 300 of this character. No, 3,000 of these characters. After that, you can read the newspaper. But the words putting together is much larger because it's a matter of a combination.
So if you want to write White House in Chinese.
Like what?
White House.
White House. So you have a white.
White House. What do you put together in terms
You
of
have a white at the first, and you have a horse second. So there's a philosophical debating saying once you have a white horse together, it's not a horse anymore. It's white horse, but it's a horse is just one character. White horse has to be 2. Now you can have a tall white horse. Then you have a 3 character. You have a tall white horse put together.
How many characters make the word or concept horse?
Or just one horse, just one, just one character. Yeah. And it looks like a horse. If I have I can draw it to you. But anyway, if you Google, you will see it looks like a horse.
Okay.
So the young kids develop their mind or their consciousness from these little images. Good images, bad images, and the characteristics have some parts, and those parts can, because the nightmare for the young kids learning is when you see a character, you don't recognize, you don't know how to read it. You don't know how to read it, so you have to go to the back, the dictionary. But for the Western language, you can always spare it. So no matter you know it or not, you can read it. But that is not the case in China. So it's a nightmare to learn Chinese for foreigners. It's very hard and low efficient, I should say.
Talking about Asian verbs. I don't know about Chinese, but I know in Japanese and Korean, you don't, in English or in Western languages, you conjugate verbs according to pronoun, I, you, he, she. That's not the case with Korean and Japanese. It's conjugated according to levels of politeness and social status. And so then when you're talking to somebody in a room with a group of people, you figure out, you use the appropriate family term to refer to the person, such as an older brother as referred to by a younger sibling. So that's another way in which the culture affects the verbs and the way of thinking.
Exactly. It's like Eskimos can have 50 different words for snow. In Chinese, a lot of concept of words are very narrow, but for the family relationships, it's very complicated. So in English, you have an uncle, but in China, there are 4 different uncles indicating the position on the family tree. So also grandfather, you have a grandfather on your mother's side, your father's side, but in Chinese, there's a different word. So you have to all memorize.
So one's thinking is dependent about the language he uses. So the language shapes up our thoughts.
Exactly.
Directly.
And the language is limited. So
we can get back to system thinking language, which basically, if it's trying to be integrative, right? It should
Yeah.
pose the person from different backgrounds to communicate relatively easily, uh, and implying concepts on a higher level, which is hard. It's a challenge, but you know, getting people from chemistry backgrounds to Eastern, to Africans, to Europeans, and we all have different backgrounds. And I think system thinking language, a way of expressing things is important. For instance, if we say a system, it unites everything from stars to people to chemical elements. Everything can be a system. And this is one of the really strong points in the language of systems thinking, that you have this universal construct, which when you understand them, you can see that there is actually, there are relationships between a star and an atom, because both are systems. So you cannot distinguish between those, but you can find similarities. And by the way, Jason, I really like your talks, because you always open a bag of worms, and then the discussion is so interesting. I could see, I have opened several worms, but then I listened to the discussion, and I could see that the different perspectives are coming in from all sides, and I love
Yes, like
that.
at the
Yeah.
beginning when you listen to him, you say, "What the hell am I doing? I have no clue what's going on." But then, as the boxes open, the worms go around.
Yeah, then it becomes interesting. For
Yeah.
instance, one of them, if I
But
may.
here's a question for the group: Are thoughts universal, or are there more like language? Do every do people in every language have the question of like what is the edge of the universe, or what if there is a God, what created God? Are there kinds of thoughts that are universal? Maybe what concept that some things are innate, that
Maybe
it's
maybe we
with
should
all
look
of
for
us, regardless
the
of the
universal
language we
ones.
use, huh?
Maybe we should look for the universal ones, because some
Uh-huh.
of them are heavily biased.
Yes.
Snow for Eskimos, for instance, which Jason just mentioned. This is heavily influenced by Eskimos. And if you find anybody from Africa understanding the concept of snow, that would be interesting. So basically, I don't think they are really universal, but some of them should be explained in a relatively uh, straightforward way. And one of the languages is, of course, mathematics. But you can see, when you understand mathematics, you can see that there are several boundaries. So it it should be recognized, its purpose, but you should not say, okay, this is the only language we should use. And this is where I agree with you, Jason, when you say, okay, this is a platform, and you can use any language which can describe your structures, your interactions, your processes, as you said, in the language you want to use. But just please declare which language are you using. So okay, say for this problem, I'm using chemistry, and cite what you're talking about, because then others may understand which language are you using for describing this particular issue, interaction, structure, whatever you are. And I think this the declaration is important. For instance, when I was trying to identify, to translate the word, not feedback, but feed forward, Google Translator did not understand what I'm talking about. So trying to translate feed forward to Slovenian, from English to Slovenian. He did not know what I'm talking about. And this is interesting because we are talking today in the discussion about intuition. Can somebody please explain what is really the difference between intuition and feed forward, not feedback? Okay, maybe just one of the worms.
A good question. Maybe they are the same concept. I mean, my definition for feed forward is that my prediction of the future influenced my current behavior. So it's the prediction or the imagination of the next time t+1 influenced my behavior at time t. So my understanding is, Igor, you agree with the effort to create a common language of SCI, right?
I think it would be helpful if the language is helpful. Then I think
I learned some
design.
Esperanto before, and to understand the verb understand is stias. SCI is there. Stias. So it's the root of science as well. So maybe we need to create a language for complexity or complex situation as a language of SCI, and translate it into African language, in Chinese, in all different kind of languages. Actually, in our Oxford project, Eagle, still going on. Okay, we have people in France and in Russia willing to translate the whole thing into their language once we're ready. And I have a little small youngster group who on AI side that's working heavily these days. Or we will have some progress report coming. So,
Igor, here's an analogical answer. The way I see it is the knowledge, the skills you get, it's like building a mental highway system. The intuition
exactly.
is the car or the traffic traveling along the highway system, which is then becomes a sort of feed forward because you're predicting based on your knowledge very quickly what might happen.
Yeah, but that part is really important because negative feedback is always very problematic. I perceive negative feedback as I'm not doing something right, right? So it's always hard to get negative feedback, even though it's very helpful. And everybody was telling me, okay, it's very helpful. And I said, why? Why is it helpful? Basically, it's helpful to have a better feed forward the next time in t+1 or t+n, whatever. But and that could clarify that a little bit better. But it's always an issue. So yeah, I agree. It's an instance, and
Ram, go
intuition.
ahead.
Yeah.
But my internet connection is stable. I'll keep the video disconnected. I'll just Igor, another way to look at feed forward and feedback. Can you hear me? Another way
Older,
to Okay. Now, I'm saying there
better.
is another way to define feedback and feed forward. I consider feed forward as communication, feedback as a command, okay, or control. So if you
No,
think about it that way, control and communication, it just takes us right back into cybernetics, okay. So, and what do you think about the defining feed forward feedback as
It's
control and communication.
Well,
if
can I
if you
suggest?
use control, I think it's narrowly in the field of engineering. But once cybernetics is expanded into beyond engineering, then
Yes.
then it's not a control, and it's you can call it, use another word for them, adjustment or
Modification, adjustment,
What I
modification.
would
Yeah.
use,
modification. Yeah, modification,
Yeah.
moderation, modification.
I
Right.
would
It's
use something
all
else.
concerned with your original goal and your current sense
Yeah.
of your current status. Is this current status getting closer to my original goal or not?
Right.
But
Yeah.
but a feed forward is a different concept. It's not a communication, not at least not equal to communication. Feed forward is to use the prediction. Feed forward, feedback is to use the result.
So
So
it is
in
action
a
and
feedback,
reaction.
yeah, in a feedback situation, you do a measurement of your current result. So the current result, you bring it back to the course side and to do the adjustment. So that is the actual measurement. But feed forward, as Eagle pointed out very correctly, is actually the system who has the ability to predict and using the prediction to modify its current pathway.
No.
So
No,
so that is communication involves is another fuzzy word. It involves the exchange of concepts, points, views, and exchange even data.
Yeah.
So the circular process is the communication, the yin-yang process.
See, feed forward happens from one element of the system to the next element, right? Feed forward goes from one part of the system to the next part of the system. And that is what I'm calling as communication. That a certain something comes into a part of the system, it does the signal to noise extraction and does something with it, and then it takes a portion of whatever it has processed and sends it to the next state. So feed forward. I don't like the word prediction at all. Feed forward is whatever came in, process it, and send it to the next stage.
So it's
So
an
that is
output. It's an
basically
output.
communication. That's what
Yeah,
communication devices do.
basically, when I was trying to get into the interaction observations, Ram,
Yeah.
the one, uh, I I identified that usually in interaction, we always look at the execution part of the interaction, but interaction starts way before. It starts when you plan to have an interaction. That's when it starts, and feed forward goes into that time frame when you prepare for interaction and you can modify how the interaction will actually execute. So it's pre-interaction. You use the knowledge, the structures you have to basically execute it optimally. And this is where feed forward comes in very handy. Now, feedback usually comes during the execution of the interaction or immediately after the execution of the interaction. It comes usually from the other system you're interacting with. So you get a feedback information, which sometimes can be used for adjusting the interaction on time, or in the next interaction, use it as feed forward, basically readjusting your mental model, your structures, how you understand the interaction. And then in the next iteration, you have a better feed forward. I understand it like that, but I'm not sure if this is a
Right.
correct
Yes.
definition.
if I
I
could
agree with you.
comment
It's
on that,
improved.
Igor, if I could comment on that. From my perspective, I face this difficulty as a biochemist, stationed somewhere between the medical profession, where they're trying to anticipate what the symptoms mean, and hence have a feed-forward therapy to apply, versus the purely mathematical formulations of inductive logic or that sort of thing. So I think this is a very general scientific problem in the sense that it depends on what your reference base is in the language you're using. So within the language that you're using, there will be a set of reference concepts, a set of reference symbols, a set of reference tools, if you would, anywhere that allows you to go from your memory system into the forward direction. And so it's very much tied up with the symbol system that you're invoking to the specific example.
No, I agree with this. And it's exactly what it is in neuroscience, right? The feedback system is called modulatory signal, and it is implemented by neuromodulators, and it changes what this particular portion of the brain is going to send it to the next stage. So it is modulation implemented by neuromodulator, and that is feedback. And the signal that has been modified is the one that is going to the next stage, and which is basically the communication. It could be either coming from externally or it could be internally generated. It's a flow of information which we call communication in the feed forward direction, in the forward direction.
Ram, Ram, your comment is very appropriate within that language system.
Yeah.
But you have to assume that you cannot necessarily assume that whoever you're communicating with knows that language system and is so constrained to those definitions.
Okay.
And this is where the issue is. If you start with a given system that's already structured in such a way that you know what the consequences of the feed forward are going to be, like a neural system, then you already have provided the pathway to interpretation of the notion of feed forward. But if you're going into a general cultural system, such as a political system, the notion of what feed forward means is very strange.
Yeah,
My background is from engineering. So in engineering cybernetics, feed forward has very clear, very specific definition. That is, let's talking about the missiles and the rockets. Feedback is the current measurement is used to do the adjustment. But the feed forward is the prediction of, it's the trajectory, the next possibility could be designed or not designed. So use that perception of that next possibility to change my mind. So in a driving situation, like when you're driving a car, and you suddenly see a child chasing a ball into the street, you brake. You brake not because the something you measured that you need to brake. You brake because your prediction that if you don't brake, something bad will happen. So prediction is there, and in all engineering cybernetics, the feedback is defined that way. So that is why when we enter into the situation of a multiple self-organization and multiple layers of system, for example, in human company society, you have a top boss, you have first-line workers, and they are feedback and feed forward going on in the same level, but in between the control levels, and there are things going. I can explain that to you in next session. That the art and the law can still have that circular causality loop going on, but not in a regular format of a feedback and feed forward. Peter, we haven't heard from you yet.
Very interesting. I agree with Jerry. Your connection with East and West is a very nice one. And I was listening to the feed-forward intuition question, and I'm very narrow-minded by being a psychiatrist, neurologist. But if I think if feed-forward would be the same as intuition, that would be in the brain, that would be a complete epileptic insult. And because as emerging a bit from the discussion immediately after you have a feed-forward signal, there must be some feed-forward inhibition in the brain to get the signal in the first place instead of chaos. And then you get emergence, and that emergence is probably a little bit more complex and gives you something like the intuition. That would be sort of my reaction on this discussion, but I've listened to all with much interest. And thank you, of course. All.
Gerald, we need some disagreement. Gerald is our expert on disagreement.
I disagree, yes.
Disagree of what?
Actually, everything. But let me ask a question, because in the course of the discussion, we lost some of the issues, which is not bad. It's not a criticism. But Jason introduced the concept of a procedure. And Jerry asked the question, what type of concepts or what type of characters can you use to actually describe a procedure? Now, that's a good question, because the answer is not obviously, well, it's very simple. In language, we have an object, and therefore in a procedure, we have an object, and we describe the procedure by the properties of the object. But that's not a very interesting answer. So I don't know, maybe Jason or maybe Jerry has an answer to that question. What is the character that you use to describe procedures? Partly of my own experience with languages, the Navajos have a different construction of their language. They don't use an object. They start every sentence with a verb. And so they can't say, for example, I go home. They have to describe going home in a very different way. So that's why I would like to repeat that question that I think Jerry asked. What is the characterization of a procedure?
Gerard, I will make an effort to respond from a very, very narrow focus, an extremely narrow focus, and that is a symbol system invoked in the table of elements. Okay, so this is not a general notion at all. It's limited to a very fine scale scope of invisible objects. And those invisible objects are things that you have some knowledge of. You have a reference system for them if you can find them. And so this reference system, if you can find those invisible objects, then you can attach a symbol to them. And then you can, in your procedures, manipulate those symbols into relationships. And if you find those objects and you have a set of them, then you can manipulate the invisible objects as symbols in your mind to create a logical statement or a logical sentence. But that logical sentence then is dependent on the reference system you use to identify your symbols. And this is why the notion of language becomes critical, is how do you form the symbol, which you will manipulate in your mind by the procedures you've learned from your expertise or whatever. And this is why I found Jason's responses so interesting, because there is a fixed set of symbols. If the Chinese character system was limited to 92 chemical elements as being the only symbols he could use, how would he make procedures? And I can't answer to Jason how he would do that, but I do know how the chemists do it. And chemists have spent the last 200 years developing a way to find procedures to identify any sort of chemical structure. And yeah, the procedure they have used for identifying the identity of the formal system, okay, now I've changed language there a great deal. The procedure they have used to characterize the identity of all these indivisible and invisible symbols is called proof of structure. And that's been a very successful procedure. The logic of it is very clear, and that's what I've been working on the last 6 weeks in response to Jason's question of how to do that. And the situation is such that the chemists have succeeded at a remarkable degree of identifying these invisible and indivisible structures. And they have some 40 million of them now that are recorded history as successful operations of feed-forward processes in the mind. Okay, some 40 million of them. And this includes all the proteins that Jason was talking about and other explanations that were involved, with how these symbols were developed from fixed procedures. And these now, of course, are effectively been computerized procedures because they are so concrete and so well established. Nevertheless, they're still dealing with abstract, concrete objects that are invisible and indivisible. That is, they're atoms. And so these are the atoms of reality, or the atoms of logical particles. I used the term logical particles 6 weeks ago, and no one liked that term at all. No one liked the notion of logical particles at all. But it turns out that this is the way that level of objectivity works, as long as they omit Frege's notion of concept.
Okay,
Jerry,
you,
Jerry, would you agree?
the core sentence, what you were saying is, I take some symbols and I manipulate them. Now that is typical for the traditional type of science, where it's a description of objects with certain properties. And what I was asking is, why isn't there some characterization of the procedures that Jason was talking about? He claimed that procedures are very important in science, in his science. So that's why I'm asking, why isn't there any linguistic structure that typically is used to describe procedures?
I have a quick question for Jerry. The solid, complete or reliable analysis with your simple system, going down to the quantum level, it stopped there. Subatomic level, that stability disappeared. And going up, you can cover almost all biology, and then maybe a little bit of psychology, but more than that, but when the complexity arises to the level of a language, if the monkeys do not have a language, but the human had to start having language. Once you have the language and you have a lot of processes similar to you using a symbol for the chemical element, and people start calling names. Our next session, I will discuss this issue of naming with Lou Kaufman. The names becomes manipulated, but kind of sticky and soft entity compared with your chemical elements. So again here, stability also lost. So Jerry's ideal world is like a neat, everything can be arranged nicely. It has an upper limit and a bottom limit. And going up, you don't have that. Going down, you don't have that either. So it's just at the level of chemical elements that you have some neat element table there that you can use and play with. So the interest, but I think that what I'm saying is that once we already getting into language, we are already, because language is not just universal. It was scattered in different areas of this planet, and they are quite different, but they are all language. And it's all God's fault that stopped the Tower of Babel. So we have confusing each other.
Hey, let me respond, because you're not interpreting the logic of what I was saying correctly. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I want to return back to Gerard's point of view here, because in modern chemistry, which fully concurs with quantum theory in the general, very general notion, and quantum theory is an intrinsic part of physical chemical representations. All right. So that in fact, the object of the mental processes that I was describing in terms of symbols and what was concerned of procedures, two parts of it are: one, you have to combine the symbols, and the second one, you have to compose them into a pattern. And that's what gives you a procedure. So you have to combine the symbols first, or in some sense or another, and then you have to compose them into a pattern of some sense. And in modern chemistry, that is done through quantum theory, and particularly the emergent properties that are involved in the logic involving the changes in the enumeration of the orbitals of the molecule. So the orbitals of the molecules must change when you combine the atoms. Or excuse me, when you combine two atoms, they don't have any molecular orbitals. But after you have combined the two atoms into a molecule, you now must create a new mathematical object by the procedures involved of determining the levels in the orbitals. And so, Jason, your basic premise that this is a local language for chemistry is basically correct. You're starting with these 92 elements, but you must backchain to quantum theory to get the orbitals. And then if you want genetics, you have to forward chain to get the structure of DNA. And so that's what I was trying to express in the differences between the 5 languages that I listed, that there is a feed forward process from the mathematical procedures that are used to the physical procedures that are used, to the chemical procedures that are used, to the genetic procedures that are used, to the clinician's procedures that are used. These are all feed forward processes. If I start from the reference system of mathematics, if I start from the reference system of medicine, then I have to find a way to backchain that way, all the way back to get down to, for example, the sickle cell anemia, the specific consequences of sickle cell anemia in causing pain in the brain. Okay, I have to back chain all that way through these different symbol systems to get to the, if you would, cause. So there's a back and forth going on here in the 5 languages in which I tried to carefully separate in terms of their logics.
I think that clarifies quite a bit. It also remains that Jason was describing his procedures in science in the way of a first step, then a second step, then a third step. So the steps are the basics and the procedure is the secondary concept. Why not have the procedure, the primary concept, and the steps, the secondary concept, which would be much more in line with what you mentioned, quantum mechanics, where there is always the problem that what you are actually seeing and can observe is a product of your process of making it possible to observe. So here, apparently, the procedure is dominant, is primary. I don't have an answer, so
Yeah.
well, I have suggestions of answers, but it is not that I am asking something extreme, but it is something that always strikes me when I read books on quantum mechanics.
Yeah, procedure can be easily translated into a long chain of steps. And
Yes.
each
That's
step
not
I was going to say
efficient way
accurate.
of describing interactions.
Yeah.
Dear folks, may I use this moment? It is 7 o'clock here. I have another appointment. May I thank you so much, and until the next time.
Okay. Anyway, we looks like we already have a good conversation. And do you have any need to extend? If yes, just send me an email. And like Eagle said, multiple kinds of worms are opened. So maybe we can talk about one of them next time. if you think which one is the more emergent, I mean important and urgent, we can do another one.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay. Jerry, you muted. We haven't.
I will offer to make a contribution in further clarification of the role of reference systems in their role in the general notions you described in that context. I've really found this the questions have been very provocative to me and made me look more broadly at what the meaning of what I've been doing is. And I think particularly Osmond's contributions there for his clarity was just wonderful. And I think that there's further need here to explore the mathematical relationships that ground these different languages, because these different languages are the reference systems, plural, for SCI.
When can you do that?
Tomorrow?
Oh,
no, anytime.
You pick up a time.
Anytime in September. Anytime in September.
Anytime in September. Okay. So I will make a suggestion on September. You send me the title of what you are trying to convey. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank
it's
you.
always a pleasure to see you guys. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.